Stress, Anxiety and Arousal by Tom Hopper. This assignment is based around two different scenarios in which the people involved are affected by different things, and these result in or are forms of stress, anxiety or arousal. Firstly, Nick, who is an A-grade student and focuses on badminton, has been struggling to play well all season and has trained with his coach to try and improve his game. The reason he might not be performing could be stress, and stress, according to Lazarus and Folkman in 1984, is a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being, which they may be unable to meet. Nick could be feeling stressed because he's an A-grade student away from badminton and spends hours doing homework and worries about his grades. Also, he is the number 2 seed and feels that he needs to do well for his team. There are different types of stress, and Nick experiences distress, which is when your performance is negatively affected by stress. However, an athlete like Andy Murray, for tennis, deals well with stress, like in the Wimbledon final, to become the first Brit to win it in a long time, and this is a form of eustress, when performance is affected positively by stress. There are symptoms of stress, and these come in different forms. Somatic, which is internal things that change, like increased heart rate and increased muscle tension. Then there is cognitive, which are your actions, so like reduced concentration and you're unable to relax. And finally, behavioural, which could be moodiness or fidgeting or trembling. Things that cause stress are called stressors, and for Nick, they come from different aspects of his life. So within badminton he has a lot of pressure and competition, but away from it, related to his schoolwork, he spends a lot of time trying to stay as an A-grade student. Nick could also be experiencing anxiety, with feeling nauseous before games, due to maybe a competitive anxiety of wanting to stay as a second seed. Anxiety is a negative state of worry, apprehension or tension that often occurs in the absence of real or obvious danger. Typically, the tension felt by anxious individuals is accompanied by a heightened state of physiological arousal, according to Buckwork and Dishman in 2002. Firstly, somatic anxiety is the physical aspects, so what results from your anxiety physiologically, so your heart rate, your muscle tension and your breathing rate. Cognitive anxiety is the psychological aspects, so what you are thinking in your head, like negative self-talk or worry. Then there are types of anxiety like trait, which you are born with and it's in your genetics, and it was how you would usually react, so how you are seen in person. But then state anxiety is how you react in a certain situation during a game. Competitive state anxiety usually follows patterns of subjective feelings of tension and inadequacy combined with heightened arousal of the ANS, according to Hackford and Schwentzke-Mezger, 1989. And all types of performers can experience this type of anxiety, but can train to control it. Factors affecting anxiety could be pre or during the activity, so before could be a fear of injury or fear of making a mistake, but during could be tiredness or fatigue, or maybe the time left in the game, and the chance you have is very important for the team. There are ways to measure anxiety, but mainly you can just use observations, questionnaires and physiological aspects of a performer during and after the activity. The next performer which suffers from a dip in performance due to something is Sarah. She suffers from a decrease of scoring average in big and important games, from 32% scoring average in big important games against Lewis and Varndine. However, in other games her scoring average is 86%. Arousal. The reason for the dip could be arousal, and one of the key factors for Sarah is arousal is a blend of physiological and psychological activity in a person, and it refers to the level of motivation, alertness and excitement at a particular moment, according to Weinberg and Gould, 2007. And different people respond to different levels of arousal in different ways. There is a diagram here that shows the levels of arousal alongside performance, and at medium levels arousal, the performer is at optimum performance, but at high levels of arousal there is a high chance of panic, and there is a bit called the stress zone, where you can lose concentration as you are over-aroused. There are 4 different theories around arousal. Firstly, there is drive theory. When, as shown in the diagram, the line should be a bit to the right, and is when as levels of arousal increase, the quality of performance increases proportionally, so it goes up at equal levels. So this means you'll be better at the sport if you have high levels of arousal, like in American football, where you need to be riled up and excited to do well. However, it doesn't really apply to poor performance, as you actually have to be good at the sport. To say you have high arousal, but still your performance won't be as good because you don't actually know how to play the sport. And also, it assumes that every athlete has poor performance or low arousal, but some athletes could prosper with low arousal levels as they are calm and collected. Next is inverted U theory, which is shown on the blue diagram, that at medium arousal performance is at its best, and then after that performance declines with too much arousal. But as shown in the other diagram, the complex tasks like archery and golf require less arousal to be at optimum performance in order to concentrate. The simple sports like American football require high levels of arousal to perform well. Criticisms of inverted U are that the optimal arousal can differ with different types of athletes, and one curve can't represent everyone's optimal levels of arousal, as before. Next is catastrophe theory, which relates to inverted U, but suggests that after optimal arousal, the performance will deteriorate steeply rather than being a gradual dip from there to there. But for this, cognitive and somatic anxiety has to be high, but for inverted U, it will decrease gradually, because your somatic anxiety is high, but your cognitive anxiety is low. The reason for catastrophe theory is that if you have both high anxiety levels, then you lose concentration or become over-aroused, so your performance will easily drop. However, it is difficult to test against, and it can't really help predict performance as something unexpected may happen in the game, like the referee giving you a yellow card, so you have to play it safe for the rest of the game. Finally, it is the eyes off theory, which stands for individual zones of optimal functioning, and this suggests that certain people function better at different levels of arousal. So athlete A could operate at low levels of arousal but be at their best performance level, but maybe athlete C, as shown, could be operating at high levels of anxiety and be at their best performance. So a real-life sporting example could be a footballer like Kevin De Bruyne, who is very calm and collected and operates at a very low level of anxiety and is very calm. But also centre-back like Lewis Dunk could need very high levels of anxiety to perform at his best point. Criticisms of eyes off are that there is not really any explanation for how they develop this theory, and it could also be affected by the performer's personality or their lifestyle, but also the situation they find themselves within the game situation. Techniques to control stress for a performer maybe like Sarah for netball. So for somatic anxiety, to try and control this, you might need to control your breathing to keep her calm while taking her shots and to improve her shot accuracy in the big games. but also for cognitive anxiety, she could give herself positive self-talk before and after games, so her confidence isn't shattered by teammates like Rachel, who aren't very supportive and understand her poor performance.